From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to explore how new CEOs can stage and manage a turnaround. I'm your host, Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. Joining me today in the studio is Dave Ratner. Dave's the former CEO of Realm. Realm is an open source database provider. Dave's now an advisor to public and private boards on the topics of strategy, implementation, and execution. And he's actually starting a new role very shortly, which will become public. And we're excited for Dave as he continues on his amazing ascent as a turnaround guy. So Dave, first off, welcome to the show. Good to see you again, man.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so if you're watching or listening and you don't want to miss our weekly show, if you want to access the content library, you as an iPhone user can download our app via the Apple App Store by searching for Sales Benchmark Index. You can then use the iPhone notifications to bring your content to your commute, your travel, and your workout routine. All right, let's get started. So the CEO role is hard enough in normal circumstances, and I can attest to that. However, if you think about testing it in the fire, what we call a turnaround, it makes it even more challenging. So think about this as companies that have experienced consistent revenue decline, customer loss, employee churn. They truly are in crisis mode. The board gets more involved, and the one thing they usually do is they bring in a CEO who specializes in turnarounds. That's the focus of our show today. So Dave, before we jump into the show and kind of walk through what you've done, I think it would be great to educate the audience on your background, because I think one of the reasons why you are effective at what you do is the composition of your background. So why don't I turn it over to you?
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to come and talk with the folks at SBI.
Yeah, likewise.
You know, I started off PhD computer science and wrote a lot of code, but learned a lot about problem solving and problem identification, root cause analysis as part of that process. Yeah. And over the course of my career, I've run engineering, I've run product and product management, I've run sales and operations and IT and support and basically every function throughout the organization. And I think that has really helped me, as we'll talk about. You know, doing a turnaround requires a lot of intuition about what's working and what's not, and really getting into it. And it's really hard to do that if you haven't been there and done it first.
Yeah. And Dave, a little fun fact, you are a triple black belt, if I understand.
I've studied a variety of different martial arts. That's true. You know, I'm a competitive person by nature.
Yeah.
And that happens both in my personal life as well as in work. And I think, you know, part of being, you know, a turnaround CEO or any executive is that, you know, will to win.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is Dave can not only outthink you, he can actually kick your ass too in multiple different disciplines. So if everything else doesn't work, you know, he can always default to that. So we're going to talk a little bit about this concept around the speed of change. So what do I mean by that? Think about investors and board members. They're always anxious for change and a turnaround. And then the arrival of a turnaround CEO, you have a series of attempts that have happened before, and they've failed. So that's what you're walking into. So think about this as there's wreckage everywhere. So Dave, how do you think about, you've now done your diagnosis, you've got some root cause, and now everybody's like, when is the fix going to happen, David? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, it's first and foremost, you have to communicate early and often with the board and with the employees on the process you're using to figure this out, right? Everyone knows that there's a problem. So everyone's sitting there waiting for you to come up with your solution and why that is. And everyone's got their own view on what it is and why and all those kinds of things. You have to give yourself a little bit of time to figure out the root cause. And this is not quarters, but this is typically some number of single-digit weeks and should be part of your 90-day plan. And you should be able to exit that 90-day plan with, here's the roadmap of what I'm going to do. Now, in my opinion, speed and pace of implementation is incredibly critical. You joined, everybody from the board to the employees is watching you to figure out, what are you going to do? You have this buy-in from the organization that you're going to make changes. So you need to figure it out quickly and then make those changes quickly. Now, you can't make every single change at once, right? Just like a product roadmap has, here's the features I'm going to deliver now, and here's the features I'm going to deliver later. There's certain things that you may want to change, but if you change everything all at once, the entire organization is going to grind to a halt. And so, I don't know, for example, maybe you want to change the entire selling process before you add new products and new channels into the mix. So it's okay to have your roadmap of what you're going to go change. But when you know what you want to change now, whether it's people, whether it's process, whether it's organization, you got to just rip the Band-Aid off and just do it.
So how do you manage the board's expectations around the speed at which those things are going to happen?
You know, so the board knows something's wrong. That's why they did a CEO change. And the board trusts that you're going to figure it out and implement it. Otherwise, they would have hired somebody else. So you realize that you're starting on day one with board buy-in, right? That there is a problem, you're going to go figure it out. So I typically communicate early and often with the board during those first 90 days about the process that I'm implementing, about who I'm talking to, about what I'm learning, making sure they realize I'm not at a root cause yet, but making sure that they understand the process that we're going through, you know, the kinds of people I'm talking to, the kinds of things that I'm doing. Second, when I figure out what that root cause is, you know, come back to the board and the investors and map that to the symptoms that they told you about in the beginning, right? It's really important that the board who sits there and says, you know, we have a sales and go-to-market problem, that you can map that to why the sales isn't being effective. In this case, you know, we're giving them spec sheets, we're not telling the customer journey correctly, et cetera. It's really important to map the root cause that you've come up with, or the root causes, to the symptoms that the board and investors have told you about.
That's great.
That way, it now gets that buy-in of, okay, I understand why this is the right root cause to go implement, and now you can lay out your fixed plan.
And now they also emotionally feel heard by you.
They feel heard, they feel validated, they don't feel stupid. They go, yeah, I knew there was something wrong here, right? But they appreciate the fact that you've gone and figured out why that thing was really happening. And so you have their buy-in, and now you can sketch that plan for implementation.
Yeah.
Right.
So then, last question on this segment. How do you track or pick the right leading indicators to say, okay, guys, it's coming, right? Because we know that revenue is the ultimate lagging indicator.
Yep.
So how do you set expectations? And are there 3 to 5 that you're like, yeah, Matt, these are the ones that I've used before and they seem to be the right ones?
I'd love to say yes.
Yeah.
You know, my experience, it's a really hard question. I said at the start, no two turnarounds are alike. And they may have similar symptoms. They typically have different root causes. There's typically different areas inside the company that you need to focus on first, second, or third. And so you can't walk in on day one with the indicators that you're going to measure for success, right? In one example, look, sales wasn't being effective, but the real reason sales wasn't being effective was we had fundamental product quality issues, and the product just absolutely, after the demo stage, did not work, right? And so there were a lot of metrics that we could talk about, could show on a weekly basis around product quality and how we were addressing that and how the customer experience was improving and those kinds of things. But it didn't have direct correlation at that time with sales and revenue. Right? But that was why sales wasn't being effective, is because every time a customer got their hands on the product, it just always fell down at some point, and they needed a fundamentally better product. So the metrics we used in that case were all around product quality, and we shifted the entire company, and we talked about that for a good quarter, or maybe even a quarter and a half, on where we were and how we were improving that. You know, in other instances, there are other metrics that we've come up with, but my opinion, you definitely can come up with 2 to 3 to 4 metrics that you're going to track, but you can't really come up with them until you've identified what that root cause is.
And then the tie-in.
And then how you're going to go fix it. And then It's about pace, it's about speed, it's about implementation, and it's about constant communication of here's the problem we're solving, here's why we're solving it, here's the metrics to show that we're making progress doing it, and it'll have the ultimate effect of driving increases in employee sat, customer sat, revenue, etc.
So Dave, always great to see you. Thank you for some great insight. Thanks for your time, your attention. I know you have a choice where you put your eyes and ears, and I truly appreciate it. As always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number. Great job, man. That was good. That was power-packed.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.